Senate Democrats are set to mirror an effort in the House to introduce a resolution to block President Trump's emergency declaration to construct a border wall. The House move is expected today, while the Senate won't be back in session until Monday. If all 47 Democrats vote for the resolution, they would only need 4 Republicans to break with the president. 4. The New York Times, meanwhile, is fact-checking the president's claims on Twitter that the wall is already being built, and the president is posting these quilts. He puts video up of construction. And the video he's posting is actually a video of work replacing already existing fencing using money that was set aside back in 2017.
So, I mean,
he's taking his lies to a whole new level.
The thing is, he's actually, he's taking credit for, I guess, maybe there's Barack Obama's wall, but actually they're just fixing it up. Maybe he can have people go over and mow Barack Obama's lawn after they're done fixing up his wall, and he can say, I invented Barack Obama's lawn in front of his house. He's already lied about walls in front of Barack Obama's house. But, Mr. President, thank you for renovating Barack Obama's wall. I'm sure he appreciates it. Krista, where do we stand with Republicans and the emergency powers? I've been very critical, as you know, have a lot of conservatives about this Republican Party under Donald Trump. But I must say, Republicans and conservative commentators, I believe, have spoken out forcefully against this emergency power because they know it could be used on guns, could be used on climate change. Where do you think we are moving through the process? Are enough Republicans going to stand up and speak out to stop this?
Well, it depends, I think, on the timeline. I think at the moment, you have about 85% of Republican voters who say that they actually support the use of the emergency declaration. And the key piece about that is that is an increase, a pretty substantial increase from where Republicans were before the president opted to use this tactic. In the abstract, you had plenty of Republican voters who were willing to say, you know, maybe I like the wall, but I don't like this strategy for getting it. But the moment the president actually took the action, a lot of Republican voters sort of came home. That for the most part, the ideological, constitutional concerns that folks like you and I have is, I think, at the moment, mostly in its commentators. It's about 15% of the Republican electorate. And I was heartened to see a number of senators, folks like Mike Lee, coming out and making the constitutional, let's limit the executive powers kind of argument. But what I'm wondering is when push comes to shove and a vote comes to the floor, how much will those Republican policymakers use their votes and say, look, well, 85% of my party says we support it. I mean, it's really that shift in the numbers going from about 60-some% to 85% is Republican voters changing once this went from being hypothetical to real. And so I am concerned, as someone who does not think the emergency declaration is the right approach, that a lot of Republican policymakers are going to go, well, you know what, now that the president's done it, let's just move forward.
So, Kristen, at least in this case, it seems like the State of the Union actually worked for Donald Trump as far as consolidating Republican support for the wall. Would you come to that conclusion?
Well, you know, I mean, the president is very good at when he takes an action. 85% tends to be this number we see pop up over and over. It tends to be what his job approval is among Republicans. And frankly, since the government shutdown ended, his job approval numbers overall have moved back into good terrain. They're in about 44%, which compared to past presidents would be a bad place to be, but for Trump, it's a very good place to be. So I think Republicans may be thinking, look, my base isn't calling for me to oppose this, you know, in the way that they would have called for me to oppose this had it been a President Obama. And so let's just move forward. And I'll be disappointed if that's what happens.
So, Sam, this resolution of disapproval will get through the House, a Democrat-controlled House. So it's now up to the Senate. They've got to swing around 4 Republicans. Susan Collins has said she would support this to block this declaration of national emergency. I'm going down the list of Republicans who previously have spoken against the national emergency declaration, and it's pretty long. Lamar Alexander, Tom Tillis, Lisa Murkowski, Rand Paul, Susan Collins, Rob Portman, Ron Johnson, Ben Sasse. The list goes on and on. Will they now, though?
But that was then.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Will they, now that it's been declared, stand up to the president?
To be determined. You know, we've seen people who have been deeply skeptical of presidential powers now change their tune. Most prominently, obviously, Mitch McConnell. I mean, Mitch McConnell, who presents himself as an institutionalist, someone who fights for congressional power with respect to the executive power, turned around and said he endorsed this. So my suspicion is that the numbers will not be there to overturn the president's emergency declaration. Even if they are, he'll veto it and he'll get his way. I also, talking to legal scholars, you get the sense that he's going to be well within his legal rights to do this. And the question becomes, what do you do after that? I do find it funny that he's tweeting out videos of the wall being constructed at the same time that he's saying he needs an emergency declaration to have the wall.
Joe, excuse me 1 second. Joe, I need to ask a question because I know.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No.
I need to ask a question because you know and I know that Trump watches the social. He's probably watching right now. Here's what I don't understand because I always thought he was a smart guy. But he's kind of a moron here. I know maybe I missed the last election, but the last election, which was the caravan election, which he put, he doubled down on, he lost historically big. He lost by 8, 9, 10%. The voters already voted on this. Now, what I don't understand, because we know he's not dumb, right? And this is just really dumb. The Democrats right now are handing him a gift with their Green Deal. If I'm Donald Trump, Donald, I know you're in your PJs, you eat your Count Chocula, and although I'm on the other side, I hate to see such stupidity. The Democrats are handing you a winning proposition, and you can run against socialism, even though it's not real socialism. You're a branding guy. You get that, don't you? So why are you being so stupid on something that is a losing proposition? Joe, you know him also, and you know he's not this dumb, so help me out here.
Well, I'm confused. Were you talking to Donald or talking to me there?
Well, I'm talking. He can't talk back, okay? So, I mean, you're kind of watching me talk to him, and now you're going to talk to both of us.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, Donnie, that Donald Trump's numbers have gone up for a variety of reasons. It never hurts for any president to have a State of the Union address. We are always shocked. Bill Clinton would talk for about 15 hours, and his poll numbers would go up after every State of the Union address. But in this case, so many of, Donald Trump's numbers going up, so much of it has to do with self-inflicted wounds by the Democratic Party. They had a bad week a couple of weeks ago. Anti-Semitic remarks, sort of this botched rollout for the Green New Deal, and several other things as well. But your bigger point is taken. This is a 33% issue. This is an issue that he focused on, and the biggest electoral defeat in terms of vote count in the history of our constitutional republic. So, again, the underlying mystery of Donald and his presidency for me is this. The narrow casting makes no sense. It's never made any sense. I've said it from day one. His supporters are with him no matter where he goes. He could have gone to the middle, or he could have gone full-blown populist. He could have picked up independents. He could have picked up a lot of other people. I will never understand, and I say it all the time, I never understand why he runs towards 33% instead of 50%. And right now he can say, oh, yeah, but I'm at 44%. Now, listen, if you're in the 40s, if you're in the low to mid 40s and you're happy about that, you're not going to get reelected. It's what I said before the midterm elections. Presidents, we can be upset that Donald Trump's at 42%. You lose at 42%, unless, of course, Howard Schultz is in this race or another independent. So I don't understand it. It makes no sense. But unless he's not going to run for president again, and he has something else in mind. I want to go to Peter Baker really quickly. Peter, while we're talking about the wall, I read somewhere yesterday that a lot of this money that Donald Trump's depending on has already been spent, which means Democrats would have to actually appropriate additional money. Is that the case?
Well, it's a complicated thing because you've got several pots of money that he's dealing with here. It's not just this money from the national emergency. The emergency declaration allows him to access a specific fund of military construction money, but he's also looking at counter-drug money. They have to find a way to replenish that particular pot because there's actually not enough money in there to fulfill the amount that he has said he's going to take from it, as well as the money that's been appropriated at various points since he became president that is specifically to permitted 4 barriers, though usually not steel walls of the kind that he wants. So it is complicated. I think to your point, by the way, about the polls, I'd add one more thought to that. Not only has he not reached out to try to broaden his base, as you say, he is the only president in the history of Gallup polls, for instance, going back, I think, all the way to FDR, the only president who has never, not one day of his presidency, had the support of a majority of the population. Not one day. He's a minority president since the beginning. And that's worked for him. He's decided that that's a winning formula. We're going to test that next year. As you say, can you win a second term if you've never one day in your presidency had the support of a majority of the American people?
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.